All right, so in this video, I just want to answer the question of what advice would I give someone who wanted to have a more peaceful or centered life? And I can think of a few things just off the top of my head without an outline, without any planning, and just completely improvised. And I think the first is unpacking the idea that that's even possible. Because I don't know if, in case you've noticed, life on Earth is somewhat chaotic and people are pretty unstable, especially over the last few years. So why I mention that is because what can often happen for people, myself included many times in the past and probably again in the future, is we will create kind of an ideal scenario or some imagined ideal environment and then beat ourselves up or feel less than or feel incapable or feel some degree of low self-worth or esteem because we haven't met this imagined ideal thing. And that seems extremely relevant to this because I think people will be like, oh, I'm experiencing stress, or I'm not perfectly handling every situation to some imagined like Instagram meme level of perfection, so something must be wrong with me. And I think, just in my opinion and my experience, a lot of that is just completely not founded in reality whatsoever. For some reason, there's this underpinning idea or philosophy or striving to be like a sociopath for whatever reason, or just be completely sanitized of all your emotions or all your desires or all your idiosyncrasies or individuality or all these different things. I just mention it because a lot of this kind of self-help, Instagram, online sort of stuff, let's say, seems like it has that kind of idea behind it, or they kind of go to the other extreme where they're sort of like completely indulging and amplifying and placing so much importance on every single feeling that you might have, or basically regarding your feelings as like the ultimate barometer for reality and the ultimate like source of truth and all these different things, which is again also, I think in my opinion, a form of encouraged narcissism and a way of actually making people less competent and less functional in the world. It's kind of like a feedback loop. It's like you go to this thing, whether it's, I don't know, Instagram or Elephant Journal or Mind Body Green or a therapist or YouTube or anything, or people like me on the internet, whatever. You basically go to this thing and then it tells you like, oh, here's an ideal, or here's something you're doing wrong. And then you're like, oh yeah, that's right. But then that just kind of like puts you on this feedback loop of like, oh, well, that's true, so there must be a bunch of other things wrong. Oh, but then, oh, they have the solution, but then, oh, there isn't a solution, but then, oh, the solution is just do more of this. And it just honestly becomes people's identity. That becomes like just, honestly, I think I just described a mental illness, ultimately. So unfortunately, a lot of what's put out as health is actually just the opposite of health. Because the thing is, like, if you're really mentally healthy, you just actually don't really think about that stuff. You don't really worry about it. Like, I don't have knee pain. I don't have back pain or really any major pain in my body. So when I get out of bed in the morning, when I get down, when I sit up, when I walk around, when I move around, I don't think about it. I'm not walking around all day worrying and analyzing like the exact angle of this joint and the exact whatever, and how I might need to do this and how I should do that, and what this might do and how my knee might interact with my shoulder, like all these different things, because everything's working pretty well. I mean, obviously it could be working better, of course, because you know, I could probably be in better shape or what have you, but there's not major like discomfort there. So my point is that people really zoom in on these things and that becomes their identity and their career and their focus, but they're like health, whatever, authorities or coaches. It's like, well, no, you're probably not really that thing because your entire focus is like kind of on the opposite of that thing. So just kind of want to throw that out there just to start off, because I think just understanding some of those things and understanding that mechanism can alleviate at least some degree of stress and turmoil, because it's also my opinion that a lot of the stuff that we experience that causes us to be not peaceful or stressed out or whatever, I think the vast majority of it is actually created by ourselves and our actions and our thoughts. Obviously, there's exceptions. Of course, someone cuts you off in traffic, you have a traumatic experience. Like, we're interacting with other people's lives as well, so obviously everything is not within our control. And I'm not saying, I'm not taking it to the extreme where people are like, oh, how I treat you isn't my problem, because it's like how you react is your problem or your issue or something. Like, I'm not saying any of that kind of like pseudo spiritual nonsense. I'm just looking at basic like cause and effect. Like, in my own life, I had this phase, and I'm obviously still doing it, where I find myself in a situation that might be stressful, might be bothering me. And then for a lot of those, what I realized is that I made a bunch of choices before that event that led to that event happening. And that had I made different choices or handled something earlier, then I might not actually be in that stressful situation. And once I did that, I just got a lot more organized and more streamlined. And then actually things got a lot easier. I was able to actually work less, and just everything just kind of like clicked and got a lot easier and more peaceful and chill because of just basic organization and structure. Which, again, why I mention that is because people for some reason often have I guess they just take things to extremes. They're like, oh, structure and order and discernment and judgment and reflection and analysis, like, oh, those are all negative, those are all oppressive qualities, like you should just embrace your feelings, go with the flow, be spontaneous and whatever. Which, I mean, yeah, if you're like engaged in dance or an artistic endeavor or in the bedroom or cooking food or different things, it's like, yeah, that's appropriate, but that's not really how you want to approach everything in life, because that's stupid. It's just like, if you have a one-size-fits-all strategy for life that you do in every situation, then of course you're going to have problems, because every situation and part of your life might be a little bit different. Like, if you work in a corporate environment, that's probably not how you would behave, I don't know, at Burning Man or in like a yoga class or something on the other extreme, and vice versa. Like, to me, that's just sort of common sense, but I can see how that can be sort of lost in translation. So really just actually getting organized. And sometimes that is really difficult to do, because the other piece of that is self-honesty and self-reflection and self-analysis, because it's obviously easier to blame people and blame situations and blame all these other factors in our environment, which of course is sometimes true. I mean, there's many things in life we just cannot control. There's certain things we kind of can have a controlling influence on, meaning our actions and our responses and how we handle things and how we structure our day and just basic things like that. And I mean, I can't tell you how many people that just something as basic as this has been just completely transformative, myself included. But I mean, in terms of clients, people I work with, and then also just friends. Like, people will have these issues, or okay, for example, I knew someone who they were just really stressed out with work and really kind of always on fight or flight and always kind of overwhelmed and always on their phone, and we'd be hanging out, going to dinner, and they're like, oh God, I gotta do my phone, I gotta do all this stuff. And basically, let's just say they could have gone down two paths. What a lot of people might do is like, oh, I need to get a coach, I need to do these things, I need to do all this expensive stuff, I need to see a healer, I need to go to like 17 different natural practitioners to try to figure out the root cause of why I'm feeling this way. But ultimately, what it came back to and what I told them was something much simpler. It was like, okay, first off, you're not eating breakfast. So you're basically like waking up in the morning on a completely empty stomach, or you're just eating a bunch of fruit, which is just amping up your blood sugar, then it's crashing, then you're just jumping straight on your computer. So that's not like a really good idea. or they're just having coffee and that's it, and then maybe like not eating until late afternoon. So it's like, all right, what you think is anxiety and all this like complicated mental, emotional stuff that you might want to go to a therapist could actually just be like indigestion or blood sugar issues, or just basic simple things like that. And then they also noticed they had zero system, zero organization and structure for how they were doing their work. They didn't have, it's just kind of like if you went in your closet, and instead of having things hung up and organized, or even in your kitchen, if you just had everything on the ground in piles, that's obviously going to be crazy. Like if you walked in my kitchen and instead of things being, you know, cups here, plates here, cookware here, silverware here, if everything was just in a big pile, that's an obvious disaster. So obviously I'm probably not going to want to cook. I'm not going to want to even go near it. I'm going to have all this avoidance because it's just a complete disaster. So that's kind of the importance of just sometimes just sitting down and actually organizing what it is we're trying to do, which is getting me to kind of a more practical aspect of what we're talking about, which is sometimes it's just as simple, especially if you're starting out. You can just write out, here are the things that are stressing me out. Here are the things that are bothering me. Here are the things that are giving me trouble. And then you can write out, okay, is there anything I can do? Is there anything I can change? Are there any adjustments I can make? Is there any connection between my behavior, my choices, my responses, and this outcome? Or is it something that's just completely out of my control? In which case, then you can kind of file it away into something else, or just realize, okay, there's nothing I can do about it. So why am I going to be so obsessed about it or upset? Versus you can say, oh, this is what's upsetting me. Oh, maybe I can see how what I'm doing or not doing or avoiding or indulging in is creating this outcome. And then actually just doing that simple thing can actually really decrease a lot of stress and lead to a lot more, just feeling more calm and control and centered, because ultimately it's what's tweaking people out is really feeling overwhelmed, but feeling overwhelmed because it's like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get it all done, or I don't know what to do, or I don't have any control, or I don't have any input or power in the situation. Whereas sometimes just having that clarity of putting it on paper can maybe not always lead to those things, but be the first steps on that path. But sometimes it can actually just lead to that, because you can realize like, oh, I am actually just creating this scenario through my responses or through my actions or whatever. And I mean, just in my own personal life, I did this last night. Couldn't really sleep, stayed up late, and I was just kind of laying in bed trying to figure out, like, because I've everything I'm saying is stuff that I've actively done in my life to overcome things, and I've told other people to do and seen it. So I'm not just making it up or reading it in a book or quoting some whatever. It's actual pragmatism. But I was trying to figure out for myself, what are the few things that has created and led to the most stress and drama and lack of ease in my life. And I was able to really dial it down to just a couple underlying patterns that when I look at my life, I'm like, yeah, these things inside of me that are motivating me and pushing me in these different directions is really what was causing and has caused like a great deal of stress in my life, which was all pretty much preventable and should be somewhat preventable moving forward. Not to say that there won't be something else or whatever, because who knows, it's life, but I just think the people maybe don't, well, I'll say that for sure humans in general want to overcomplicate things and make it seem so much bigger, and we get caught up in our feelings, which can sometimes be useful, but sometimes something that can feel huge might actually be really small, like my example earlier. Like, oh, I have anxiety and I have all this stuff and I have like all these problems, I should go to therapy and I should do all this complicated stuff. It's like, or you could just eat breakfast, get organized, maybe go for a jog or a walk, and then you'll be surprised that you feel a million times better. And that's basically exactly what happened. And I can tell a dozen other stories of the exact same kind of thing, of people just doing something so simple and so basic and really actually just letting things sort out. So the last sort of abstract thing that I'll say is that for whatever reason, the idea of having power or control or some degree of sovereignty or influence in your life and in your environment is for some reason oddly demonized in these sort of health cultures or self-improvement kind of cultures, or they take it to the other extreme, which is like kind of being a complete self-absorbed, really kind of unpleasant person, which obviously having more power over your life and more influence in your environment probably be a good thing, at least in your own personal space. And that's something that probably everyone will have to figure out for themselves and kind of get that right. But the last thing I'll say is, of course, supplements and herbs and things like that can be helpful and can be useful. For me personally, taking reishi mushroom definitely early on in my health journey was extremely useful, extremely beneficial, and for a solid decade or so really helped me with a lot of those processes I talked about, getting more mentally organized, getting more, just being able to think more clearly and coherently, meaning like I can think about a subject and then maybe I'll go off on a tangent, but then I can go back and be like, oh yeah, this is the thought that I started with, or this is where I was thinking, this is a side thing, tangent, so let me go back to where I originally started, get back on that stream, and then go through that. And just things like that reishi can really help with. Gynostemma also very helpful, very useful, holy basil, those are all really helpful herbs to kind of calm the stress response, which of course will help us feel naturally more calm and more focused. So anyways, hopefully that helps, and it wasn't too much of just a long unhinged rant, but again, it's all based on pragmatism, it's all based on my own experience and then working with other people, and like I said, I could give a dozen other examples, but hopefully that's given me the idea. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you soon.